10 years ago, when I got into pharma, I thought it was going to be one of the safest industries. But today, unfortunately, we see industry redundancies on the rise. So how can biotech be your next big opportunity? Let's hear from Matt Britland, Managing Director of Medwise, identified a gap in the market and turned an opportunity into a thriving business.
Last question from one of our guests, Jackson in Sydney. He's obviously done a little bit of research on you. His question is, you've worked in big pharma and recently started Medwise to support the industry. What prompted this move, number one? And number two, are there any other areas you've seen where pharmaceutical companies could use some additional external support?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, for many years, particularly when I was in the director kind of seat, I thought there's no consulting firm, and there's quite a lot of consulting firms, but there's no consulting firms that just live, breathe, sleep, medical affairs, patient affairs, medical communications. A lot of companies are kind of figuring out medical affairs is growing and they're kind of tagging on to being a creative agency, or they're doing, everything under the sun. I just thought there's a demand, there's a need. Medical affairs does two things. It finds gaps and it fills gaps. You find gaps in knowledge, you fill them gaps with educational programs and the like. You find gaps in data and you fill it with evidence generation plans. You find gaps in confidence and you fill it with, access programs and other things. And this was just another example of a gap. And I was like, well, I need to fill that gap. Yeah. But also it came at a time when I thought, where we see medical affairs now is very similar to what we saw with clinical trials a decade ago, where CROs started to sorry, my phone's going. CROs actually started to come to fruition. And I think more medical affairs is going to get outsourced because we're sort of experts in what we do. Yeah. And as you know, and as most of your audience I'm sure know, the root of a drug is full of ebbs and flows, ups and downs. You get to a big launch of a blockbuster, you probably don't need these great big teams. And I think that the main reason that we're seeing lots of restructures continuously within the industry is because of that. You need people, you don't need people. But if you bring people on and build these big teams, you've got to continuously have redundancies and continuously rebuild. And I think more people are realizing actually what they can do is plug in experts in various different ways, just like we did with CROs. And CROs now are the main way most companies do clinical trials. And we could see that. We could see that 18 months ago when we set the plan for this. And I imagine it's going to get more and more and more and more and more outsourced as time goes on. Biotech's also coming.
I've actually just started a new role in biotech. If you're interested in learning more about my experience, or maybe some of the differences between big pharma and biotech, let me know in the comments below.
So if you think about, what the FDA are looking at currently, they've seen, I think it's a 44% increase of biotech companies who are submitting INDs and taking drugs to a much later level before they sell. And biotech companies are in these medical affairs departments too. Mm-hmm. Who's going to want to put on a 20-person medical affairs medical affairs team at a biotech? So we did some modeling and we figured that this was going to be something that was going to keep happening. And we thought, well, fill the gap. In Australia, the market's a duopoly. Be first, be second, or just don't bother. And so we were like, well, we're the first. We're the first Australian APAC specific medical affairs company. We've got a good team. We've got a good investors. We've got a good backing. Let's go for it.
We should go about that part.
Yes, if you talk about my partner, yeah. No. But no, we've had what we were in, 9 months in by the time this goes out, maybe a year in, and it's been extraordinary. And I'd really, anybody that wants to do it. I did it because I was at a point in my career where my instinct took over, if my instinct takes that, that's it. I've got nothing to do with it. My brain has got nothing to do with it.
Dove straight into the deep end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there was a lot of thought that happened subconsciously. And maybe you answered his second question there about where else consultants can help pharma. Maybe it's the staffing thing, because we are seeing a lot of restructuring in the industry.
Staffing and training as well. So, I mean, if you medical affairs, a plumber has got more standards than a medical affairs professional. Right? So if you get your plumber around, they've got the standard. We've got no standards, medical affairs. So I think there's a huge part to play in professional education and development. Say we're launching stepwise across, people that want to get into industry, to onboard into leaders, to get in company to actually be the best medical affairs departments they can possibly be. I think, again, whilst you could potentially do that internally, what are you going to do once the train, you need to be bringing people in who are expert at it and also have exposure across the whole industry. Because if you just try and do it in your company, you're just going to recreate, wash and repeat and rinse that company culture over and over again. Whereas we're an industry, need to learn from the industry. So I think more of that will be external as well.
Yeah, brilliant answer.
They often say your network is your net worth. So if you want to master networking in pharma, our next video is a masterclass you won't want to miss. Click here to boost your career.